today. I'm going to call our meeting to order and welcome to Sunrise School Division regular board meeting on May the 17th. My name is Paul Mangan. I'm the board chair. Before we go to O Canada, I'm going to share that we have 6 trustees with us: Trustee Duma, Trustee Reed, Trustee Rowland, Trustee Nickel, Trustee Harris, and myself. On the line we have calling in remotely is Trustee Inslee, Trustee Pachakowski, and Trustee Barry are not able to make it tonight. And in the room we have Superintendent Timko, Secretary Treasurer Thiessen, Assistant Superintendent Fielberg, our borrowed Executive Secretary Jennifer Baker, and we have Gord Tulloch here with us. He's the Director of Information Technology for us. 1.02 is O Canada. I think that we have O Canada from Dugald School, so please stand if you're able to do so. Thank you. Merci to École Dugald School. Much appreciated. 1.3 is our treaty acknowledgement, and Trustee Harris is going to read out our treaty acknowledgement.
We acknowledge the traditional land upon which Sunrise School Division resides as Treaty 1 territory. We honor our partnership with Canada's original peoples and respect the gifts of Indigenous history, culture, and language. We commit to moving forward in partnership with our communities in a spirit of collaboration and reconciliation.
Thanks, Trustee Harris. 2.1 is the adoption of our agenda. Be it resolved, the board approve the agenda. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Nickel, seconded by Trustee Rowland. Hearing any questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. So it passed with our 7 trustees here. Thank you. Chair's comments, a reminder that if you have any questions tonight, please send to Jody Thiessen, that's THIESSEN at sunrisesd.ca. Please put your name, address, and the sender that included in the email for questions, and we'll get to them during our question period later on in the evening. 3.2 is share a story, and I think there's a few trustees that have some stories to go ahead and share. I think Trustee Nickel, you have some stories to share, so go ahead.
Hi, the first story, I just want to mention that in Whitemouth, a very small school, they went to the junior varsity provincial. There we sent students to the provincial. Unfortunately, they didn't get any medals, but they enjoyed themselves. One of them they were ranked 8th in the province. The other thing is that cross country is coming soon, and in the middle years we have 96% of the students participating. They will be going to Boards Hill Park this Thursday. So to have 96%, of course, there's not that many middle year students, but there's still 96 of them trying to run and be something dealing with athletics. And the other thing we mentioned is that Whitewell School had the first assembly in 3 years. And they had a MAD presentation that they, in case you don't know what MAD is, it's Mothers Against Drunk Driving or something like that. I think that's what it is.
Thanks, Trustee Nichol. Anyone else share a story? Trustee Duma?
I just wanted to share that Oakbank Elementary is participating in a donation drive through the Manitoba Parents for Ukrainian Education. They're doing a collection of Backpacks for Hope initiative, pending the arrival on May the 23rd of a federally chartered plane from the Ukraine, of which they believe that 20% of the people arriving will be children. So they're creating backpacks. They're looking for donations, and it's through Oakbank Elementary as a collection point for school supplies that are part of this backpack bundle. Pickup is going to be on May the 20th, and so I would suggest if anybody's interested to contact the principal at Oakbank Elementary.
Thanks, Trustee Duma. Just to add on top of that, divisions got together, and I think we talked about it last time we did get together. So trustees across, divisions across the province, the Ukrainian parents got school divisions together to talk about the potential arrival of Ukrainian children coming to our areas. And Superintendent Timko has appointed Principal Denica from Oakbank Elementary, and he spoke a little bit about it. And he'll be taking the lead for Sunrise School Division about anybody that's coming to our area, and again trying to get students, if we can get them into some kind of normalcy as quickly as possible for that. That's the whole idea. So Kathy's got, or is taking the lead certainly for our school division. So I just wanted to add that from your comment. Thanks, Trustee Duma. Anyone else share a story? So I'm going to share a couple of stories. On May the 4th, I attended the Winnipeg High School Hockey Awards, and that school, Springfield Collegiate, was recognized as champions, so kudos to them. As well as there were two students that were recognized as most valuable players. One was Josh Rock as the most valuable goalie from Springfield Collegiate, and there was also a most valuable player for the entire league, Caden Bruchansky from Springfield, and two of them are excellent, I'm going to call them kids, players from the Oakbank area. I do think that I'm gonna give out my own award to a kid. His name's Nolan Vandebush from Springfield Collegiate. I think that he didn't get an award and recognized, and I thought he was probably the best player that we played against. So kudos to them. It kind of hurt me to say those kind of things, but just wanted to let you know that kudos to them as to what's going on and the work that they've done. So their coaches, congratulations to them. Again, I was at Parview School last night, and they had a bingo and great turnout and raising money for a worthy cause. They're taking students to Drumheller, to the Dinosaur Museum, and that was a real good turnout. I also want to again give a shout out to Springfield Collegiate, and this is now their administration. So I'm tied with high school lacrosse, and Carol Blocker, the vice principal at the school, is the student representative. And on Friday, I was out in Portage La Prairie at Portage Institute, Portage Collegiate, and Carol was out there in the rain, supporting her school. And then on the Saturday, she's out in Parview supporting her school as a teacher representative in the rain again. And who else showed up was Mr. Dell. Mr. Dell on a Saturday goes out to Parview to go ahead and watch a lacrosse game. So there's some dedication from the principals at Springfield Collegiate. So kudos to them. Unfortunately, they went out and saw Parview beat Springfield Collegiate, and Not that I want to talk too much about Powerview beating Springfield Collegiate, but it was really good to see. Certainly the competition that's going on, and the talk about the people then giving up their weekends to go ahead and supervise. There is again in Powerview, there's another drama production. It's 33 Little Pigs, and these are grade 5 and 6 students that are going on Wednesday and this Thursday night. So if you've got nothing to do, get out to Powerview and come and watch a drama production of 33 Little Pigs. That's my share of story. Anyone else? Okay, thank you for doing that. Kathy, we have a delegation. It's all yours.
All right, so we've asked Gord to make a presentation tonight to kind of highlight some features of the ICT department that's so valuable as we use technology today. So in the report, it'll talk about a little bit of the day-to-day and then highlight some stuff that will make some recommendations for some software changes. So I'll be, I guess, the Vanna White. I'll roll through the slides, and you just tell me, Gord, when to stop. Okay.
We probably need to fix that. So I need to use my FM voice. So thank you very much. That's turned up too loud. I could fix it, but then we wouldn't be doing this. Thank you very much for inviting me. Good evening. This is my kind of my annual progress report for ICT. The State of the Union is good. Is this the appropriate time to say it? Basically, things go well. We've kept busy with a variety of different things. Oh, interesting. So I'll watch this one. Something that was kind of emergent last year was our insurance carrier made it quite clear to us that they would no longer allow us to carry cyber risk insurance unless there was a significant upgrade in the security model for how people could access things in the division. We've actually implemented a lot of that, so it wasn't a lot for us to do. Part of it was to make sure that if somebody was accessing their email, that they had to use something called multi-factor authentication, which means it's something you have and something you know. So for example, you know your password and you have an email address that they can send you a confirmation email. So multi-factor authentication is a way to ensure that somebody else doesn't get into your stuff, right? And we've extended that a couple of ways. One is the servers that we have access to, a lot of them have very sensitive information on. So we implemented, and instead of it just being me entering my username and password into these servers, we now have multi-factors so that, as you can see on the screen, if I enter my username and password, my phone actually pops up a message saying somebody's trying to get into your account. Is that okay? I say yes, and I'm into the server. So it adds yet another layer of security to our already fairly extensive security. So we implemented all of the requested things and signed off on the attestation that allowed us to get cyber insurance moving forward. So that was a fairly big job, with kudos to our senior service specialists, John DiCaro and Kevin Lang, for implementing most of that. And we actually had the opportunity also to protect PowerSchool, which is our finance, HR, and payroll system. You'd think the insurance company would care about that, but they in fact don't for some reason. But we also added multi-factor authentication on that, and also that ends up implementing it on the workboard function that subs use, which caused a fair bit of business for our service desk, but it's all calmed down now and is going quite well. So part of also the risks that we're facing these days, and you know, it's hitting the papers and the news pretty frequently, is something called ransomware. And what ransomware is is the bad guys come in and they scramble all of your data, and then they say, if you pay me X amount of dollars, $1 million, we will unscramble your data. And they may or may not, but you know, that you don't want to get in that situation in the first place. Now, historically, with something like that has happened, maybe a virus came in or something, we've just restored our backup of the data, and we don't have to worry about it. The unfortunate thing now is the bad guys are getting clever enough that they are now coming in, deleting all of your backups, and then scrambling your data. So that is defeated that way. So a lot of people are having real problems with ransomware. So we have 2 redundant data centers. We have all of our servers and storage in 2 different places, and they back each other up. So if something happens in Oakbank, Beausejour can take over all of Oakbank and vice versa. So we're in pretty good shape, and we have been. We're probably one of the first school divisions to implement that sort of redundancy in Manitoba. We've had that for probably 10 years. So what we're doing now, just in case we get into a scenario where there is a penetration and the bad guys come in and delete all our backups, we now have another set of backups, emergency backups that we use on an air-gapped data center. In other words, we connect to that data center, we copy all our stuff there, and then that is disconnected, and there is no connection between us and that data center unless we're actually backing ourselves up. So in the unlikely event that we do get somebody coming in, deleting all our backups in preparation to scramble all our data, our response to that would be to wipe everything and just restore from backup. So we have that extra layer of protection. And once again, our senior server techs have been doing fantastic work getting that all set up. That'll be up and running June 1st in a data center in Winnipeg, and we'll have that added layer of security on our environment. So we've been busy doing that. Next slide. We've been doing a lot with data. We've been extracting a lot of data from Maplewood and other places, and we've been putting it into a data warehouse. I call it a data mart, so that schools can do things like pick up their marks from last year and do some comparisons, load them into spreadsheets, graph them, and things. So we've been doing a lot of work with a tool called Power BI, which is part of Office 365, and delivering that to schools so that they can readily pick up all of their marks from different years all the way back to 2013, as well as current interim marks for the current year. So you see a graph here from Anola, I think it's Anola School in grade 1, all of their different marks, so they can see that visually. I think you probably saw some of these graphs in this venue as well. So that's, we've been busy doing that, and adding, now we're working on adding things like French marks and additional information such as staff and attendance data. So that's been, we've been working on that quite busily as well. We have a computer refresh coming up, as we do most years. We're now year 1 of our 5-year cycle, which is PowerView, Lac-Du-Bonnet, and Whitemount. We'll be replacing about 213 desktop computers, 39 high-performance desktop computers, which are usually used in graphics labs, so they're a little faster and better graphics, and 228 laptops. So a lot of schools, notably PowerView and Centennial, have decided to move away from desktops to laptops. So we've been replacing desktops with laptops in those schools. It is a little more expensive, unfortunately, so our budget has to go up a little bit, but it is a better form factor for them to obviously deliver their services in their school. So we replace computers every 5 years. That's about the length of time it takes for a computer to reach a point where it's slow enough that it causes problems for the users. So those computers are recycled. They're essentially sold back to the company that comes and takes them away and does our leasing, and we get paid for a portion of that. Generally, we lease computers, so if we lease a bunch of computers, we buy them out from the company that we lease them from, and then the company that comes and takes them away pays us approximately the same amount as the buyer. So it's usually a fairly inexpensive transaction for us. The good news is that the computers get taken away, recycled, and we have brand new computers on the desk for staff and students. So we're in year 1 of year 5. Next year will be Beausejour. The year following will be the Springfield area, and then we have a couple of years of bits and pieces. Next. So some of the challenges that ICT has experienced, every year I come here and every year I say we're a challenge that we need to replace equipment in the schools. Generally, it's easy to say, okay, we want to put a smart board or a loft, as we're using now, into this classroom, but you have to remember that 5 years from now, that loft is starting to get a little old and needs to be replaced. Now, the good news is the life cycles of some of these new devices that we're putting in are actually a little longer, so we expect the lofts to last more than 5 years without us having to spend a lot of time taking care of them. Smart boards, in fact, we tend to start needing to do things like replace components and that sort of thing at the 5-year level. And some of our smart boards, like 20% of the devices we have in the division are older than 5 years. Some of them are older than 8 years, and they're starting to get fussy, which means they're not operating in the classroom, and you've got a frustrated teacher in front of a bunch of kids who are expecting to see something displayed on their smart board. So we want to make sure that these things are kept up and running. So we have an ongoing replacement program. So we need to continue doing that. The good news is we did have a fairly serious deficit in some of our mobile devices, the iPads, in the schools, where they were old enough that you couldn't update them and you couldn't install a lot of software on them. So and some of the critical software that we do use, like Microsoft Teams, could not be installed on them. So we needed to replace them. Through COVID funding, ICT Reserve, and a variety of other avenues, we've been able to replace all of those obsolete devices. And unfortunately, this year there will be a whole new crop of them, but we're keeping up with it on the mobile device, on the tablet front, and we're doing better on the smart board interactive display front. So we'll continue to try and get better. Another challenge this year is that 2 of my technicians are retiring, which are happy events, unless you happen to need to go and hire new technicians. It was for Don Niedermeyer up in Powerview, who lives up in Powerview and is based in Powerview School, and Bruce Schindel here, who's based here in Beausejour, are retiring this. Bruce is retiring the end of June, and Don is retiring the end of July, which means they need to be replaced. So we're currently engaged in getting replacements for them. As a matter of fact, a whole bunch of resumes will hit my desk today, and we have a really good range of folks that have applied, including some people who are actually in those areas, which is the real fear, is that you'll get a whole bunch of applicants from Winnipeg, and then they'll have to drive out to Powerview and Lackawanna and Whitemount and Beausejour every day. So we are fortunate that we have had some applicants from the communities where they will be based, and obviously if all things work well, we'll actually have people who live in the communities where they will be working, which is fantastic. We've found in ICT that if we have employees who live in the community who may have kids in the system, John DiPiero, Kevin Lang, a few of our folks, Lindsay Fernando, have kids in the system and live in the area, so they are, I won't call them lifers, but they're very committed to the school division, and we can count on them being long-term employees, so that we don't have the same kind of trepidation of spending money training them as we might if somebody was a little more likely to move on. So we're doing well in that regard. We'll probably make decisions in the next few weeks, and those folks will be starting on July 1st in school. So now the biggest issue we've faced this year has been our student information system. About 2003, we bought a package called Maplewood, which replaced an old package called Treblack that we used to use. Maplewood was actually an extremely good package for quite a number of years. It was a Canadian package. It was owned by individuals out in London, Ontario. Support was good. It was a mature package. There wasn't a lot of new development happening on it, and so it was very stable, worked well. Unfortunately, Maplewood, Dave mentioned the owner of Maplewood, sold it to a company called Assembly, who have made significant changes to the support model, to the organization, and now they've released a new version of the software, which has been in the works for a long time, and we've been watching it avidly, but the version of the software they've released has not been ready for prime time. We've been delaying moving to that new version of the software for probably 5 years, saying it's not ready yet. It's got to be essentially functionally the same as the software we're using now, or we're going to run into problems. So unfortunately, they indicated that they're sunsetting the old version in September 2022, which means we're forced to move either in September 2022 during school startup, which is a really, really bad idea. We have a lot of stuff during startup that ICT has to deal with, the schools have to deal with normally. So adding on a new software implementation at that point was not a great idea. So we decided to go in January of this year, and it didn't go well. It's been a huge load on ICT almost daily, dealing with parts of the system which are not complete, not ready for prime time, not operating, not working the way it should work. So we've been struggling over the last 6 months or 5 months to make it work. We've been working with the vendor to try to get the software up to snuff, but everybody has reached a level of frustration where we're tired of debugging their software for them, and it's reached a point where schools need to be functional. So we have looked at other packages in the past. Part of the reason we didn't go to those other packages was the province was looking at a provincial student information system. The likelihood of us seeing that, based on what, the organizations that I belong to, like Manitoba Association of Education Technology, Leaders, FADL, we're talking to the province, and it's looking like it's going to be 5 years before we see it at Sunrise, which is a good enough time horizon that it's worth moving to a new package, doing all the training, doing all the work we need to do to move to that new package. So rather than stay with EdSambly, it's time to change. Now, we did do an RFP a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, where EdSambly, a package called PowerSchool, and a third vendor chose not to bid. That was Follett with their Aspen product. So we've already gone out to market. Those are the 3 packages that bid. PowerSchool was number 2, so it was logical for us to look at PowerSchool as number 2. Next slide. Now the good news is everybody else is going that way too. So you'll see on this list of school divisions that a large percentage of school divisions have moved to PowerSchool, particularly rural school divisions. And as well, a lot of former Maplewood school divisions have moved to PowerSchool. Instead of going to EdSambly, like St. River, for example, or like us, have gone to EdSambly and don't like it, we're moving. So a lot of school divisions have moved, which means we have a lot of resources locally that we can leverage. So I would say half of those school divisions on that list were formerly Maplewood and have moved to the new software. So we're not at the leading edge, we're not at the trailing edge, we're in the hump of people that are moving to the new software. So we should be in good shape as far as functionality and the ability for our local community of users to help support us. Next slide. So the standard implementation that they wanted to sell us, we're hearing from other school divisions that have done it, isn't worth the money. It's worth 20 grand and it's not worth the money. So what we're going to do is we're going to engage a local person. Actually, Scott Bestvader works for Hanover School Division, and because they're pretty much done their implementation, Hanover is actually hiring Scott out as a consultant to help other school divisions implement PowerSchool. So what he's able to do is come in and help us do the implementation, provide a lot of the standard data that we would normally have to generate. So a lot of that standard implementation will be done with the assistance of Mr. Bestvader. And again, we're leveraging the fact that a lot of people are moving forward with PowerSchool. So we know PowerSchool because we use their accounting and finance, HR, payroll system. So we know the support is not great. The training is not great, but we also know that there's a huge community that within the province that are adjusting for that by helping each other, as well as having some local resources to provide that help. So moving forward, we'll be relying heavily on initially on Mr. Bestvader to help us with the implementation as a consultant, and we'll be working ourselves into the Power School user group and local community so that we can take advantage of the fact there's a lot of local support for this product. So looking as far as what it costs, right now we spend about $38,800 a year on Edassembly and one instance of the Mandarin library software for the assistive technology folks. Moving forward, the cost of implementing the first year of Power Schools is about 50 grand more than we have in our budget. So that includes the license for the software, obviously, the setup, the training. We do have to pay for Edassembly for part of the year, and we will have to pay for Edassembly to allow us access to archival data of prior years, right? So we don't have to download it all. We can access the software just for the purpose of accessing prior years if we need to. So that all works out to about 90 grand, which is about 50 grand more than we pay for Edassembly. That's the first year cost. That of course goes down to about 61,000 a year each year subsequent. Now, half of that extra money that we would have to pay on top of it is the fact that Maplewood Edassembly had a library product that we used. Power School uses other third-party library software. So we will be moving to a new library software. Over the past few weeks, we've been evaluating software, and it looks like we'll be moving to a product called Destiny. We had some librarians, Jody Wilgosh is kind of quarterbacking the whole initiative. We've had some librarians looking at it, and the consensus is that we're pretty happy with that as a product for our library function. So we would be adding that library by the end of, basically the end of the summer. We'd have to migrate library, and then we can migrate to Power School on, sort of a January 2023 timeline. Not great mid-year, but much better than trying to do it during startup. Next slide. So just to recap, the required first-year budget is about 90 grand. Currently, we have about 38.8, so we need about 51,000 for that implementation. If we need any more, we do have budget within ICT to cover contingencies. So we would need approval to extract 50 grand from the ICT reserve to cover the implementation costs, the first-year implementation costs for Power School. Next. So the timeline looks like this. July 1st, we would be signing on with Power School. We'd be gaining access to a staging environment. We'd be notifying in August. We need to notify Edassembly of the change of status. We would be renewing the full contract. We'd have to renegotiate a contract. We have archival access to data. By September, we need to get library up and running, which is already underway. September, October, data migration will be happening, which is generally me extracting a bunch of data from Edassembly and loading it up to Power School, assisted by Mr. Bestvader. October, we would be working on integration. So, for example, we have integration with our Transfinder bus software that needs to continue so that any demographics changes for kids can be uploaded to Transfinder. So when new kids arrive in the division, they have to go on the bus. They have to go there. So we have to integrate that as well as with Clever for student support services. We do some training October, November for ICT, and then for the admins and secretaries. January 2nd, or I should say December 2nd, is a PD day that we'll be using to train teachers to do attendance and to do mark book and that sort of thing. And then our go live would be January 2023. And then thereafter is spending a fair bit of time to take 10 years worth of work that we did on Assembly and Maplewood and migrating it all forward to Power School. So that's a big task. So it will take a while, but it's not an insurmountable thing. Next slide. Staffing and support model. Obviously, I do the integration stuff. Data migration would be myself, Mr. Bestvader, and the vendor. Training the trainers. Scott can do the training, which saves us a lot of money. Our staff would be training teachers and administrators and learning how to train so they can train on an ongoing basis. Our first level of support is always Noreen, our secretary, and Lindsay, our first level support service desk person. Second level of support would be Scott and myself. Third level of support would be the vendor if there's things we can't solve. And then there's a lot of customizations you can make on this product, which have already been done in places like Hanover, so we would be bringing those in to add to the utility software for our customers that are using it. Next slide. That's open for questions. Hopefully that fire hose wasn't too much to drink from, but yeah, it's a big topic, but considering the how painful it has been the last 5 months to deal with Assembly, we're really looking forward to the opportunity to move to something that's a little more reliable. Pardon me? Thank you.
Thanks, Gord, for that. So there's some questions. Trustee Nicol?
I'm not quite sure whether you can answer these questions now, but I was talking to somebody from Ontario, and I forgot, they told me what system they're using, but the system they use was quite good as far as I'm concerned. Like, for instance, in this new system, the individual students are able to get into the system and see their own marks.
Just like on Assembly, there's a parent portal and a student portal. May take a little bit of time to implement, but that is available to us. And actually, delivery of report cards is available to us at all as well when we get to it.
Along with that, the system that you're using at Power School, will they automatically send an email? Like, for instance, the system I was described to is that anytime a kid gets a test, automatically email goes to the parent and says, this is a mark the kid's got.
No, I don't think so. And the reason why I don't think we would do that is because that is generally, if you look at the various interacting pieces of software we have, a lot of that functionality is being used in Microsoft Teams as opposed to being in the student information system. Now, the good news is there is integration between Microsoft Teams and Power School. So what happens is the teacher uses the templates in Teams to set up maybe a quiz as opposed to a test. They set up a quiz, the student takes the quiz, the teacher marks it, and right now the teacher has to manually move that mark to Power School or to Assembly so it's reflected in the mark book. With Power School, they're integrated, so that can actually be pushed right up. So the level of integration is better. Whether we do the email thing, that I haven't gotten that request. It is a doable thing, and just from an architectural standpoint, I would tend to do it in Teams instead of Power School. It's possible, but I don't think we would do it. We'd have to decide to do it one way or another.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Gord? Trustee Rowland?
I was just wondering what happens with the iPads that were retired. You said the other desktops and I think laptops were sold. What about the iPads? What did we do with those?
So there's two scenarios. One is that they're still sort of usable, and I kind of resisted this for a long time because it means that we have to take care of sort of usable stuff instead of new stuff. But I have been convinced, voluntold, to allow schools to keep devices that are still usable, right, as opposed to removing them. Once we do remove them, we are paid for them. They're a core just like a computer, so we do get paid. I think it's about $35, depending on the model. We get paid for salvage on those devices.
Other questions for Gord? Trustee Harris?
Not sure how to start this. As a software developer myself, it's a challenge to develop good software, but very rewarding. So it's Too bad you're going through all of this over the last few months. Unfortunate. What are the other city school divisions using? Because you didn't, there were only 2 in your list there, I think, for city. What are the other ones using?
There are 2 major software packages. One is called Mayette, which is a local product. I'm going to talk technical here for a minute, but it used to run on an AS400. It's a sister, I think, locally. I used to encounter them in my prior life as somebody who worked in AS400. So Mayette is one, and Tyler is another. I know Louis Riel uses Tyler. I think Winnipeg One uses Mayette. So those are the 2 big ones. Power School is getting a lot of penetration, obviously, and of course Assembly is. I think there's still a division using Trebline. Kathy.
Anyone else? So Gord, I have a couple of them. One is in the past, trustees have received an inventory, and maybe that's something that Kathy can talk, you can talk to Kathy about, but an inventory of what schools have with regard to technology, smart boards, iPads, laptops, and desktops. That would be helpful for us to know kind of what schools go ahead and have. So I was, for the last number of years before I retired in Interlake, and we used PowerSchool. And PowerSchool was a great tool. The parent portal, where parents can go on and check their students' grades, where students can go on and check their grades themselves. The grade book, as long as staff are trained and you've got a plan to go ahead and do that. So kudos to you, but I can tell you that teachers will be vibrating about using a new grade book and technology, but again, you've got a training plan, so it looks like that's good. So kudos to you for that, for the rollout. So those things are great to go ahead and see as we change things for our teachers. As long as there was a support to do that, that's good. And one of the things that Interlake School Division had is they had a Power School guru. So that as a school principal, when I was shaking because I couldn't get my report cards copied because they weren't printing out properly, there was somebody that I could pick up the phone and call. When I was setting up a timetable that at the end of the year, there was a Power School guru. So it looks like you've got that planned in here about having somebody so that administrators can call when those things are going on. Good on us, because those things will be critical for us as we move forward. So the other thing that you're asking, so basically what I think that I saw on here is you're looking for some dollars. You're looking for $50,000 right now, and that's something that's coming up eventually for us in our meeting. So you're looking for $50,000 with regard to how this is going. So my question to you is, what does your current budget look like, and how are you doing with your current budget for this year?
Good. The current budget is interesting because we had a requirement to pull stuff out of our reserve last year, and it kind of bled into this year. We do have a $300,000 expenditure for new equipment that came out of the budget. So the number currently looks dire, but I have my other spreadsheet where I take all that stuff out, and it doesn't look so bad. So we're in pretty good shape this year for our budget. I'm not sure if my boss would agree with me, but I think as normal, there's a lot of moving around, but we're in pretty good shape for this year, and of course next year's a new year. We have made changes to the budget, the budgetary process. We have made changes to the budget to accommodate the expected expenditure. And just as a comment on the inventory, ICT has a very, very comprehensive and detailed inventory of every single device in the schools, whether they be document cameras, smart boards, printers, iPads, and that was just updated. The job I give new employees, and we got 2 of them last year, is go and update the inventory so they can get into every nook and cranny of their new schools. So that was actually very recently updated. for all schools, and not quite yet for SEC, SPC, and transportation, but we'll be working on that this summer. So that inventory is very fresh and very active.
Trustee Nickel?
One of the, this is not really a question, it's a statement. One of the questions dealing with budget is that you say you're getting money from when you sell the computers, is that correct? When you sell the computers, you're going to get some money back, right? Yeah. And the way the financial statement in the past is done is we never credit your department with that amount of money. So that's something that the finance committee is working on. So if you look at his budget, you will say he's even, but he got $100,000 when he sold that, but that doesn't go into his budget for some reason. And that's something that we are trying to look in, so that gives us, the board, a better picture of what the budget really is. Any income coming from any department, that includes maintenance, we never put that money back into their budget, which is something that we have talked about for a few years, to how we're going to do that. So that's why if you look at his own budget, is probably said he's doing very well, because he is probably adding that in, so he knows what it is. But officially on the audit statement, it doesn't show that.
So were you telling us then that he doesn't have $50,000 because we've got money from all the other things that we sold that he's got?
That was just a figure, $100,000. That was not the exact amount.
So I'm assuming then that the finance committee, and you, Jody, with the finance committee, you've taken a look at the budget as to where things are, and the request then for the $50,000 is something that has the finance committee looked at it?
No, because this is first time that he's officially presented it.
Okay, thanks. Anything else for, yeah?
Boy, things sure have changed within 10, 15 years in terms of ICT, for sure. I guess my question is, like, we've done a lot of changes in the classroom, the record keeping, everything that we do, and I guess it's gone into the finance departments, the transportation, the classroom, the teachers, recording, student services. My question is there anything within Sunrise where there's a gap, where people have said, gee, we wished we had something here, that has come to you?
Diane, are you talking about learning resources that schools need? Is that what you're talking about?
Because we meet employees, we meet students, we meet parents. Like, I'm just wondering if there's something that is a gap that has come out, like, repeatedly, right, as something that might be missing. Because I know even this parent portal thing is really cool. Some divisions have had it for a long time, but I think for sure for parents that's cool. But just curious.
I think the number one, I won't call it a complaint, the number one ask from schools has previously been, we need more equipment. And the answer has been for quite a long time that we don't have the technical resources to take care of anything more than we have now. We have 1,200 iPads. If we want to add another 300, somebody has to be able to take care of it, and somebody has to be able to take care of it without reducing the service levels unacceptably in other areas of the school division. So last year, thank you very much, board, we did add one technician, and that one technician has now given us the capability to allow schools not only to keep devices that they previously would have had to have returned, so it's sort of a one-in, one-out policy. I'll give you a new iPad, I take your old one back. Now that isn't strictly enforced anymore. They can keep the devices if they actually work. And also we have, that last chunk of cash that came in went straight towards buying iPads, laptops, carts for the schools, and that has really reduced that deficit that we've accumulated over the years in older equipment as well as lack of equipment, right? So for example, Anola School, they, a year ago they would have come to us and said, we need 4 of these iPads in this classroom to do this specific thing. We want to use this so kids can listen to ebooks online, which was one example. You know, a year ago I would have said, you know, one in, one out. Now I say, here's your 4 iPads, right? So it gives us the ability to add devices to the environment that we previously didn't. And those devices are being added specifically for purposes within the schools which will benefit student learning. So previously that was the biggest gap, I think. It was, we just didn't have the ability to add to the fleet, right? Now we can add to the fleet. We have, you know, the resources to keep doing that for a while, and eventually we'll reach a point where either we reach steady state, hopefully, where we don't have to keep adding a lot of devices. We have a good number of them in the schools, or we'll reach a point where we are at the level where we need to stop acquiring new devices because we can't support any more than we have. So hopefully that the former rather than the latter will happen. And in the meantime, we do have the capability to add to the fleet, which has really paid dividends for a number of schools in a number of situations.
So I think that Trustee Duman and myself are going to ask the question, or the question is, before we get to we can add to the fleet, the board wants to know. And so by you coming back and saying that we needed to add to the fleet, now again through Kathy, of course, this kind of thing, but I don't think that we want to hear from principals that we can't go ahead and get any technology because we can't add. I'm just going to use your terms. We can't add to the fleet. And I think that that's where Trustee Duma is getting to, is that part of it is let's talk about that to find out where we are. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? Russ?
I have several questions. I was listening to the entire presentation, but I'm from the Before Technology group, so I have to, it takes me a while to digest what you say, and if somebody asks a question, I'm still trying to digest the first one, and you're giving the third question and answer, so I fall behind. I'm just wondering, what's the security system used by Power School? Which do they use the dual, like?
That is truly an excellent question. I don't think so. I think they use the user ID and password type scenario, but it is an excellent question. We can layer a multi-factor on top of staff, for example. So that'll be part of the implementation process, is exactly how we secure the system to the standard that we have now established. So if, you know, we used to call it virtual private networks and all that kind of stuff, it's gotten a lot simpler since then. So that's part of the implementation process, is decide, okay, here's the security model, and here's what we have to do to bring it up to our standard. But it's an excellent question, because it's something that we look at very closely during any software implementation, is how can we protect our data, our student data. Sometimes teachers get mad at us because we log them out off of the system after an hour. So they can't sit on the system when they've walked away, gone for coffee, right? Because then somebody can come to their desk and sit down and start making marks or whatever, right? So a lot of these things we do during implementations to improve the security of the system. Sometimes they're a little intrusive, but we try to keep them as unobtrusive as possible so people can get their work done with a minimum. But yeah, it's definitely something we're looking at. And actually offhand, I don't remember reading whether or not they have multi-factor, but I suspect no. It's not typically part of those software. However, they have put it in their finance systems, so they'll be moving it into their other systems. But we can accommodate.
Something else, Russ?
I'll just, yeah, the reason I was asking, I know Sonova had some problems a few years back with something to do with their system. and they tightened their security and went to the system where you have to type in your password, and then it asks you and says, well, what was the first car you bought? Or something similar. What's your mother's maiden name, or something along that line? What school did you go to? So that seems to me to work quite well, because nobody knows those answers, or they shouldn't know those answers about you. I wouldn't.
Well, a lot of them they do. So generally we don't use that technique. What we use is, so for example, we know you have a phone, and the phone number is the only phone number for that phone that's out there. So we will send you a message on your phone asking you if you are indeed the person who is logging in. So if somebody knew my mother's maiden name, which is not difficult to find out, right? That sort of system can be defeated, it's by something called social engineering, which is finding out things about people. So we prefer systems that are a little more robust, like the phones, or sending an email to you saying, somebody just tried to log in as you. Is this true? Because you should be the only one who has access. So that is a multi-factor authentication method. It's a little older than
Hey Russ, what's your first car that you bought?
Pardon me?
What's the first car that you bought?
Don't answer.
I'm just teasing you.
First, actually, we had a Mercedes. So not many people would give that answer, I don't think. But just one more question, and can I have, pardon me? Keep going. My next question, it gets very frustrating. Today it took me 20 minutes to get on the system here, which was very frustrating, but okay, now I noticed they also mentioned here the system where you try to get onto the system, and then you put your password in, and then they send a code to your phone, and you have to type the code in, and then you're onto the system. It seems foolproof, but for myself, I find it very disruptive, because I have a financial group that I look at stocks on, and they do that, and so they get me to give them the password, which I do. Then they say that, okay, we're going to send a code to your cell phone. And my response is, I don't have a cell phone. My wife has one, and so I use the code on hers, but the problem is I try to get on the system, and she's out shopping somewhere. So she gets this code on her cell phone saying, 648291, and she's thinking, what is this? And I'm sitting at home, and I can't use the computer because, so that seems to be a drawback to that. That's why I'm asking which method they use.
Russ, you need to buy a cell phone if you want to go ahead and do that. That's the way that we're going through. And so, unfortunately, your wife's getting all kinds of codes, but unless you want to give out the Mercedes question all the time, that's the way it goes. Yep. Yep, I gotcha. Yep. Don?
Power School doesn't, but for me anyway, because I'm with Power School financially, they don't send it on the cell phone, they give me email. So if I'm using a computer, I got to get the email, no problem. They give an email, they don't use my cell phone. However, I belong to something else, and I put down, I had the choice, do you want email or do you want a text? I put down text. So when I get it from the school, I get an email, but when I get it from this other group that requires me to do two things, they text me. So depending how you set it up, most places you can set up both text and email.
Okay, I'm going to move us along Do you have anyone else, other questions? All right. All right, good. Thanks very much, Gord. We appreciate you coming out and sharing this information, informative. And Russ isn't going to tell anybody about his Mercedes car anymore. All right, thanks. We're going to move on to 5.1, our minutes. Be it resolved that the board adopt the May 3rd, 2022 board meeting minutes. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by trustee Nichols, seconded by trustee Rowland. Any comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll vote. So it passed 6 with 1 abstention. We have the superintendent's report. Kath, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. You have the report in front of you, and I want to just draw some attention to a couple of pieces. Some of the stuff you would have seen a couple of meetings ago, so some highlights around course registrations. Our Schools of Choice deadline has now passed, and so we are working on giving answers to families if they've made a School of Choice request. Those should be coming out as soon as we are able to do them, and some of that depends on how our staffing at the schools is going, but those will come out as soon as we are able. I wanted to highlight that the board passed a calendar last board meeting, and so we are having students and staff in classes right up until Thursday, December 22nd, which means that we're able to have the next 2 weeks of Christmas holiday break, and students and staff would return on January 9th. There are other divisions in this region that are doing that, and then some divisions are having the split week, so just to pay attention to or go to the website and grab the calendar from our website to check those dates out. One of the other pieces that I wanted to highlight is that just recently Manitoba Education and Early Childhood Learning released a document, and it looks a little like this, and the website is there, and it is their action plan. And this is a new document that's come out, and they have done a job of taking the K-12 Commission recommendations and sorting all of the K-12 recommendations into underway, which means they have initiated certain things by April 2022, upcoming, not yet initiated, but planning to do by April 2023, and then future actions that they've identified they want to do by April 2024. And so it's important for school divisions, and we've already started to tackle some of these things to make sure that we're on track with the things that are upcoming and future items. And at first glance, there's a lot of things where we are already ahead of the curve and are well on our way to the things that are identified in here. There are 4 pillars for student success, and I'll just quickly highlight those. High quality learning, student engagement and well-being, excellence in teaching and leadership, and then responsive systems. And so lots of the work that we've been doing exactly around responsive systems is really reflective in here, and there is some curriculum work that accompanies this that is not yet public. So just get a chance to get on there and have a look at all of the recommendations from the Commission on K-12 Education. There were 3 items that they have now put into writing that they say they are not looking to implement from the recommendations. They're all numbered, so number 11, creating a new principals association and removing principals and vice principals from the teacher bargaining unit, is not proceeding. Number 12, reorganizing administrative staff to create a business manager position for schools or families of schools, is not proceeding. And number 68, consolidating the province's public school boards into 6 to 8 regional boards consisting of 5 to 7 trustees, the majority of whom would be appointed and the others elective, is not proceeding. So they have named those 3 recommendations that are not proceeding. There is a wonderful appendix at the back which tells you exactly the state of all of the recommendations that they've made. So click on that link and have a look at where that progress is going, and you can watch how Sunrise works along with that. Did want to point out that we still do have rapid antigen test kits, and we're looking to get those out into schools so that families can get them in case they should need them over the summer holidays, wanting to make sure that all of our stock is out and about and in people's hands. Unless there's questions, those are the highlights from my report.
Comments for Kathy, anyone? Okay, Kath, thank you. The reporting template schedule that you've got there, Kath, 6.2, it's for information. Did you want to add anything? So people have that, that template that's there. Again, continuing on taking a look as to where things are. If you have any questions, certainly go ahead and take a look at it. Thanks, Catherine, for providing that. Any questions on the reporting template? Okay, let's move on. Jody, Secretary Treasurer.
Yeah, just in regards to what we've been up to in the operational side, just some highlights. I've been very fortunate to go see Oakbank Elementary, SCI, SMS, and Powerview School last week. I'm just amazed by when I step into the schools how nice and clean they are, how friendly the staff are. It's just a pleasure to walk into those schools and just see everything that takes place and how organized everybody is. So I feel very welcomed and fortunate to pop into those schools and have a chat with those principals. So that was a nice visit. From our board meeting last May 3rd, I was able to reach out to the town of Beausejour. I reached out to the CAO to advise them that we've been looking into building a facility use agreement. Unfortunately, the CAO of the town of Beausejour is away at this time, but hopefully they're just on vacation or something, so they should be back later next week, so we can continue our discussions on that. I'm also reached out to the RMS Springfield, their CAO, to talk about Dougal Daycare, the parking lot there, and see what kind of matters we can come up with and options. So discussions will happen. Currently staff are unavailable due to the weather situation, flooding, and vacation, so we'll eventually touch base again before summertime comes around. And I was fortunate enough to have a good conversation about the Education Foundation and the history about it. I've reached out now to the legal team, Fillmore Riley, to understand the next steps. And hopefully by our next board meeting, I'll have some information to provide you guys. Other than that, all the other departments are pretty much getting ready for the end of the school year. Transportation is definitely working on their annual driver evaluations. Maintenance, again, they're working and prepping for the summertime where they can get into the schools and start their capital projects. So if you guys have any other questions on the report, just let me know.
Thanks, Jody. Anything for Jody? Okay, Jody, we're going to move on. Thank you for that. So 8.1 is a COVID cost. It's an update for information. Is there anything to be highlighted to it?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to last time it was presented to the board. I don't think there's anything to really highlight. We are seeing an uptick in staffing costs, but it's kind of going with the trend. So nothing really surprising jumping out unless anybody has some questions.
So we're going to see you're projecting, Jody, $662,000 deficit from COVID?
Yeah, when I compare, and I'll just try and throw it up on the screen here. Yeah, when I compare what we received from funding to what we've actually spent, there are some stuff that we are considering along with other school divisions after having a conversation with the province, things we can consider that may have normally been absorbed under our regular day-to-day operations, but because it could be considered under COVID matters, we can reflect it in this capture, so, if that makes sense.
And we'll know, when will you know that we're able to do that?
I think I submitted a report recently, about 2 weeks ago, to the province. They're reviewing it right now, along with all the other school divisions. They came back with a question about our projections. And unfortunately, with COVID, it's hard to say, yeah, this is going to be the ongoing trend, or we'll come back to normal operations. But I think they just questioned on what our projections are going to look like. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Jody. Appreciate it. Any other comments for Jody? Okay. 8.2 is duplicated in 10.2, so we'll wait till we get to 10.2 for our student information system. 8.3 is our financial monitoring report. This is coming from the Finance Committee, Don, your group, about going ahead and doing that. And so I do believe that you have two motions that are there in the report. Be it resolved that the board accept the recommendation from the Finance Committee regarding the financial monitoring report and will be named the Divisional Finance Summary and will be prepared by the Secretary Treasurer. And be it further resolved that a board Be it further resolved that the board will accept the recommendation from the Finance Committee. The Divisional Finance Summary will be a living document to be amended as Finance Committee recommends going forward. So this is the motion that you're bringing forward, Don? Okay, so it's motion by Trustee Nicol. I need a seconder to the motion. Seconder by Trustee Reed. Comments to the motion?
I just want to talk a little bit about the motion before. What we did is that we looked at it and I gave you a draft, or the Finance Committee gave you a draft, what it was going to look like. We listened to what some of the suggestions were. One of the things we added on to is that we thought that would be useful for the Secretary to give a commentary at the end. So that's why that's been added there. And the reason that we want a living document, because we don't want to come back every time we make a slight change. All of a sudden we might decide as a Finance Committee that we might want to add some more information. The idea is to add information, not take away information, because there might be something that we might want to add, and we want to give the ability to add that without making a motion every time we add something. But we have no intention of taking anything away right now.
Thank you. I'll ask other trustee. Thanks, Don.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Karen.
I believe, as Trustee Duma mentioned, the inclusion or some accommodation being meant to reference the Sunrise Education Foundation on the financial monitoring report. Is that something that's going to be added?
We decided that we wouldn't put the Education Foundation on this report because there is a standard line in the agenda all the time anyway. So if anything that we need to talk about Education Foundation will go in that line and not in this one here. That's the reason we didn't want to. If we did what you were suggesting, then there would be duplication, and we decided we don't want to do a duplication. So.
Thanks, Trustee Nicol. Trustee Duma? Keep going, Karen.
It was a question just for clarification, unless I'm missing something or this is not the right place to ask this question. Balancing the reserves, number one, so the balance at June the 30th, 2022 will be 4,749.49. Where does that number come from? I've added and subtracted every single piece of information above it that I could try to come up with that number. I'm just wondering how is that number calculated? Sorry if this is not the right place to ask, but I'm just asking for clarification on where that number comes from.
Yeah, sorry, Don. Yeah, I believe what it was going to be reflected, it should have been balanced as of June 30th, 2021. I think what the idea was, those comments were carried on from the financial monitoring report, and it should have been reflected, the balance at June 30th, 2021, and it's supposed to be the balance of the bus replacement reserve. So what it does is it takes the bus replacement reserve, even though it's looking at 186,000, then it talks about transferred out for the purchase of buses for 514,000, and then it's supposed to be transferred funds in for the sale of the truck, and then there's another transfer in from the balance of our vehicle support grant. So with all those things considered, that's where the balance of $4,749 should be.
Thanks, Jody.
If I take the 108,
Go
take
ahead.
186,000, the 514, sorry, somebody's got their microphone on.
My suggestion, Karen, is if you have some questions certainly about the numbers that are in there, reach out to Jody and Jody can go ahead and answer those questions for you. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to go back to the report. I think Trustee Duma, you had your hand up.
I think the actual report itself has hit some of the targets of what the board has looked at over time. So it, we always talk about reserves, we talk about surplus, we talk about comparing the budgets. Those are things that have been common data points that the board has looked at in terms of monitoring. We've added in the balances owings, we've added in the line of credit. That was an interesting one. The grants is a nice one to add in too. The sick leave information, those are all things that have come out of board discussion. So in terms of what is called a monitoring report, this is now being called a monthly summary. I think the idea is good. I can see where it's coming from. I just think that it should be in a policy. And I think it should be in a policy, and I also think that there should be a principle behind why we want to look at a monitoring report, what it tells us, and why it's important for the board to look at it monthly. And I also think that it should be part of the Finance Committee description of the Finance Committee, one of their jobs. It should be included. So we've added in the Audit Committee, that sort of thing, but I think that this has to be bigger than just approving this motion. So I think it's a bigger picture for me. And the other piece of the monitoring report, which I think is important, is that it's got to be numbers in front of you, but you've got to also know that the Finance Committee has actually looked at a ledger or looked at a bank statement, and actually it's not just written off of an Excel sheet, but it's coming off of something that they have visually checked. Like, did they check the end result of the line of credit directly off the bank statement? Like, what did they use to verify? Because that's what monitoring is. It's not just having, somebody doing a calculation and printing it out. It has to be monitored by something else. So that's the one piece I think that to me means monitoring. So anyways, just my comments.
Thank you. I think then our policy committee certainly heard some of that. I see Robin writing it down, and it's something then for policy to go ahead and take a look at. Thanks for your comments. Any other trustee comments? Okay. Hearing none, then we'll go ahead and vote on it. Okay, so this passed with five voting yes, 1 no, and 1 abstaining. Thank you. We're at 8.4, grade 7 and 8 provincial data. That's for information. Kathy, did you want to add anything?
Just a quick statement that the document I referred to, again, shifting the provincial assessment program away from what they've currently been looking at in grade 3, 4, 7, 8, and 12 is upcoming for this April. So we've typically followed this. The province used to do engagement and numeracy at grade 7, and they now just do numeracy at grade 7, and then some ELA outcomes at grade 8. So just information, but those changes are there as well.
I guess that's from the data. What's your opinion on how we're doing?
So in the front matter, I guess, of the data, it will sort of give you the highlights of where we're at. So I can share that on the screen, or it just kind of goes through here.
You don't have to go through a detail. I'm really just asking from your opinion, from the information that we're having, Are you content with where we're going?
I think as an overall division, yeah, we're either on par, above, and in some places we're slightly below. I can look at this and then I can also drill down school by school and look at the information where we might need to be doing a little bit of work in an area and where we're exceeding. So for me, the value is in sharing that information with schools on where they're at, as opposed to perhaps the overall here.
Anyone else? Thanks for that, Kathy. 8.5, student fees and field trip report.
Yeah, so one of the things that the board has asked for is to have some further information on school fees and field trips. So this board has made a motion and is doing the school supply purchase for families so that in the fall students will come with their school supplies. So I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to our schools and to get some feedback from our schools on where are they at. And it was a pretty important piece for them to point out that they feel as though there's not an issue with the general school fees and there's not an issue with the field trips, that they are covering things that they can cover and are asking for minimal amounts and do general fundraising. There is not anywhere in our school division where if someone can't afford to do something that the school doesn't cover that in terms of the general fees. So some of the principals were saying, you know, why are we looking at this if it's not broken? Why would we be looking at school fees and why would we be looking at field trips? So I wanted to make sure that I brought that up to your attention. At the same time, I gathered up information of the kinds of things we did for general school fees. So you'll see in this category here, these are the kinds of things that would be in a general school fee collection. And I did also ask them, what would be the amount per student? So the ranges in our different schools went from $5 to $30 for a general school fee. So if I went to the high end of that, 4,720 kids, that's the amount that would be to cover general school fees for all our schools. Some of the course-specific fees, so things like curling ice rental, art kit materials, moto sport materials, babysitting course certification fees, those kinds of things that are extras that someone walks away, you know, with something. It's also a bit of a moving target because sometimes we have those courses when there's an interest and sometimes it's experiential based and we don't really know how many kids are going to take those courses on any given year. But they would say that if we were looking at an amount per middle year student in the industrial arts, that's a place where we could actually look at and say, there's a place where we think we need to be potentially looking at some extra funding, because currently our middle year students in industrial arts and home ec just use the funding that's given to senior years. They don't have their own funding. So the ask from the schools was, would the board consider funding our middle years exposures in industrial arts and home ec? That would be 1,120 kids at $50 each, and that's a $56,000 for the industrial arts and home ec. Lastly, the field trip fees. So this is probably the biggest one because schools take students on field trips locally, provincially, nationally, internationally, and in any host of combinations. Some are day trips, some are overnight trips, some are multiple days. Some are curriculum-based, some are interest-based. Every field trip that we offer is optional, and attendance of a student at a field trip is discretional by the parents. If there is a cost issue, then the schools cover the cost for students who might have you know, some concerns with covering costs. We make sure that there's no student who's left behind if cost is the barrier or the challenge. The other difficult part is how many field trips a child may get from one year to the next is dependent upon which teacher is doing which courses or what class a student might be in. And those are the list of all kinds of different field trips that teachers might take their kids on. We also use our field trip budget to bring people into the school. So motivational speakers, resident authors, those kinds of things. Again, they had the question around, are we concerned with how it's run? The schools aren't hearing any concerns from parents and families and wanted to know why the board wanted to look at this topic. There was a question around if we're covering costs for transportation and substitutes and fees for entry into places. Are we covering lunch and meal costs as well for students because they all need to bring a lunch for that? Is there any expectation for every child in every course to have a field trip? So those were some of the big picture questions that our schools and our principals had. The recommendation from them was to leave the process of providing field trips as is, unless there's some reason why we would be stepping away from a user pay model. They do balance the number of trips offered with equitable participation, and they try to subsidize those costs as much as they can. Field trips are a pretty integral part, but it also depends on whether or not we have a teacher who is willing to plan and take people on a field trip. There is an existing field trip budget, and we do that based on a distance away from Winnipeg. So there are 3 zones, because it takes a lot more to travel in from Whitemouth or Lac du Bonnet or Powerview into an activity in the city. So we do have a field trip budget for them that covers transportation and sub-costs. If the board is looking to allocate additional funds to field trips, they were in the ballpark of $50 to $100 a student, and that would be at an additional cost of $472,000. Adding the 3 amounts together, there's what we have in there, and that amount doesn't include instrument rentals, doesn't include facilities rentals or other items and products kept by kids. For information, our average cost of an instrument rental for the year is $120 a student, and art kits are about $40 a student if those are the 2 things that are not considered in there. I don't know if there's questions. Probably lots.
Trustee Nichol?
I'm going to talk from experience when I was a teacher, and I'm not quite sure how many of those administrators talked to the parents. When I was teaching, there was kids that did not go on field trips because they did not have the money. Even though that we told them that the school would give them the money, you're going to try and tell me a grade 7 kid is going to admit that he hasn't got the money to go to a field trip. What he does, he just tells the teacher he's not going, he's got a dental appointment. He's not going to let his peers know that he doesn't have the money. So we did a survey when we were doing it, and then we found out that the number of kids that were missing school on days that there was field trips was fairly high. So what we did is that we got, when I was teaching, we did away with, if you went on a field trip, if it was curricular based, just curricular based, not if it's interest. If it was curricular based, then the school paid for it. There was money in those days there. If you got your picture taken, everything else, you got a whole bunch of money because you got your picture taken. So the school always had money to pay that. So at that time, there was no school fees at all. And I think it's the same thing here. I know there's going to be kids that in Whitemouth, if they can't afford to pay for it, they're not going to tell the teacher they can't afford to pay for it. They're just not going to come to school. And on top of that, they said it's optional. Well, if it's optional, I'm not quite sure when a kid goes to a field trip, he comes back from the field trip, the teacher gives him assignment, and there's marks applied to, but he couldn't go to the field trip because he didn't have the money. So how can you say that it's optional? Because you more or less have to go to the field trip in order to get your marks. So the only way you get away with that is that if it's curriculum based, that we pay for that the school pays for the field trips. The province told us that we should have equitable funding. So it's the same thing. If we want to have everybody to be equal to be able to get the education, it should not depend whether you have the money or not. And that's why I strongly suggest that we look at paying, if it's a curriculum based, it's a field trip, that we pay for it. At the same time, we're not going to allow them to go, we'll have a budget, and you're not going to go on 25 field trips, but there will be a budget that says, okay. And when I was teaching, it was that every classroom was allowed 1 field trip. And that's what they were. And I know that Whitemouth School, I don't know what the other schools did, but I know Whitemouth School, kids did not have to pay.
Thanks, Trustee Nichol. Anyone else? Trustee Rowland?
One area that stands out for me is just that there's a difference between $5 and $30 for kids to attend school. And maybe we're looking at the biggest picture right now where everything's included, but we could chip away at some of it maybe. And I do have a problem that even schools in similar areas range between $5 and $30 just to come on the first day. So I would like to see more equity that way.
We also had the question that came up around subsidizing the general schools fees with fundraising. Some schools do hot dog days, and some do spring teas, and some do chocolate bar sales and those kinds of things. And so they will do a fundraising activity, which is why they can keep a school fee down. But at the end of the day, it's probably the same people that are paying those fees. It's just not called a $30 fee, it's a fundraising fee. So that kind of mucks that up a little bit as well, and that might be some of the discrepancy.
Anyone else? So I'm going to talk. Thanks for this, Kath, for putting this together. And I hope that principals are listening. Because for a principal to say to me that a field trip budget should have an amount of $50 to $100 per student is outrageous. Don, when we talked about one person, a field trip for basically, I think that we've talked here in Sunrise, is that, hey, there's really one field trip that we're going to have a bus to go, and I think that the busing allocation, Kathy, is probably about one busing trip, and you've broken it down because of different geography for each class to go. Some schools are smart and they put them classes together, but they're saying that it costs $50 to $100 per student for that one field trip. I'm not happy about that conversation. So I really hope, and I'm for principals to say that to us, come on, $50 to $100 that we have to add to a budget for a student to be able to go on a field trip, I'm disappointed. I agree with Don. Do you know what the whole idea is? That we're trying to limit some of the costs that are going on. And you know what, you've got field trips here and we've got school fees here, and if we do need to add some money to schools because of school fees so that people don't have to pay for a woodworking, to take a woodworking course and some of those things, absolutely. Because I'm the one that started bringing up that conversation, certainly about making sure that it was available to all. Some of the interest trips, if people want to go, great, there's some of the, go ahead and do that. But again, the province does say is that we cannot charge for a busing costs because they give us money to make sure that if somebody's going on a curriculum-related trip, we have the money and we're allocating that to the schools. I appreciate the information that you've collected and the conversation that you've had with some administrators, but I am disappointed certainly in the $50 to $100 per student needed to offset field trip fees is one thing. I do think that school fees and charging for school fees because of, and again, you've given a list of some, and maybe we do need to add. But what I do know is our schools have an awful lot of money. And again, I want principals to hear this. Every year, we have extra revenue that's not being spent. And for them to come back to us and say that, that we need more money, I'm struggling with it a little bit. And again, this is a good conversation for us to continue to go ahead and have. And Kathy, you've started this, certainly a good conversation. And I'm struggling with certainly the field trip saying, I do want us to table this to have further conversation about it, but I'm struggling a little bit. Anyone else want to comment? Okay, Don, I'll go back to you.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what they expect on a field trip. Like, for instance, if you go to, I agree that if you go to the Man Nature, sometimes it costs you $5, $10, that's it. Or if you go to Fort Garry, there's a $5, $10 fee. I think we should be paying those $5, $10 fees. There won't be, like you said, there won't be $50 to $100 cost to these things. Some of these dishes that go, there is no cost. So that's okay, but it is a cost. Like, you can go to the planetarium now. Maybe I'm dating myself because I haven't gone to there for a while, but when I went, it was $5. Probably it's at 10 or 15, but it's a far cry from $100. So I think that we can afford to, if it's curriculum based, I think we can afford to be able to ensure that every student can go. It doesn't matter whether they have the money or not. And if you think, again, I'm going to emphasize again, if you think kids are going to tell teachers that they don't have the money, you're an ostrich.
Yeah, and again, so bringing speakers in and presenters, these type of activities are included but not limited to. Yeah, there's great things that are going on, but we have pretty healthy budgets in our schools. So again, I have no problem about hoping principals are listening to some of this conversation as to where we are. So school fees, coming back to it, yeah, do you know what? Maybe there is some needed that we need to add some support to our schools. But on the one hand, we're not spending the money that we give the schools now. So loud and clear schools, you're asking for more money, but you're not spending your money now. Anyways, I think let's table this. Go ahead, Trustee Duma.
Yeah, it's good food for thought, for sure. But one of the things I think about is that when we're offering courses in schools, I just don't think that a person should say, I can't take that band class because I can't afford an instrument, or I can't take that art class or that home ec class because I can't buy fabric. I just think that I'm just thinking it through, those are the things that are important to me more than the discussion on the field trip money. It's about actually coming to the classroom and feeling like you can't take that class because you haven't got the money, even in terms of the other ones that we do, like the vocational programming, whether it's mechanics or whatever else, like, you know, having to bring equipment for the classroom. I think we should cover those costs that help in their learning. That to me is more important than the other stuff right now, is just in classroom equality. They're all coming to the room, they all got the fabric, they all got the machinery, they've got what they need to do their work all in the classroom together. So that's just my piece.
Yeah, I'm going to let you end, Cap, with it, but let's put this back on the agenda and have another conversation about it, but your floor.
Well, just that clear question around what further information do you need me to go back and get from the system? Because I think what I heard from our system is that some of those things that are curricular, and I have to use an example like our marine biology class. And I think it's a great class and it's a wonderful opportunity, but part of that is a field trip to Catalina Island. Is that a necessary part of the curriculum or isn't it? And if you ask those students and that teacher, they would say, yes, this is critical and crucial to what we're doing for that curriculum. If you ask students who are in the curling academy, buying the equipment like the shoes and the broom and the ice rental and all of those are critical to the curling academy. So for me to be able to give you an apples to apples comparison, I do want to know what it is that you need here at this table in a really clear sense of where that line is, or where you think, do you want me to draw where I think the line is? That's my struggle.
You know what, Cap, those are great conversations, and I know the marine biology course at Springfield Collegiate has been a good one, and those are tough ones. But I guess the question is, are there students at Springfield Collegiate that are not able to take that course because they don't have the money? I don't know that. But I could tell you, if that marine biology course was at Powerview School, I could tell you that there'd be a lot of kids that wouldn't be able to take that course. And so, yeah, I hear you, and there isn't an easy answer, because there are some very good things that are going on. And I'm not saying that we don't have to provide some funding to support the kind of a no-fee thing. And maybe we need to hash some of those things out, but you know what, somebody says that they need art kit materials. Well, we give enough money to schools for school supplies that principals, you need to manage that yourselves. And I guess, hopefully they're telling us that they can manage that. We do have some specific programs. We do have a curling academy. And again, yeah, I think that we probably need to look at some of those kind of things as we go through, but again, it shouldn't be where kids cannot take courses because of fees. And I think Trustee Nichols right. There's not an awful lot of people that are saying, and again, many of the school principals and teachers know their kids in their schools, but none of them are coming up and saying, I can't take that because I don't have the money. They're just not saying that. Anyways, it's a great, thank you for this, Kathy. I'm the one, and if that's brought it up, and let's continue to have the conversation. I'm going to go to Trustee Rowland, and then I'll come back to you, Kath, and then we're done.
I just wanted to clarify, Kathy, were you saying just a moment ago that you were prepared to do your version of what the line should be? That you were willing to propose?
So again, one of the other, like maybe the last word that I wanted to say was to thank the board and to also thank the admin group, because part of the difficulty of being in this chair is navigating between what schools are saying to me and what the board is saying to me. And so sometimes drawing that line of, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm hearing what school is saying, at some point someone has to say, what about this, or what are we tracking? I don't think that I have the answer any more than anyone else does. But by virtue of being in this chair, I think I probably have to come up with an answer or recommendation or solution of some kind to start with.
I just wanted to, I agree, because even as having this discussion, we aren't aware of every program that is being offered and what expenses are attached to that to make this proper line for ourselves. So I appreciate your input on that, and I do acknowledge that we are only aware of our own experiences and exposure, but our intention is that we would like to see equity amongst the schools and amongst the students. So we have to rely, I would of course love to rely on your expertise on that line and educate us in what is available in schools, all of them.
Yeah, thanks again, Kath. I'll say it again for a third time. I cannot believe that we said that it costs $50 to $100 per student for a field trip that they're looking for us to add. I can't believe that. So, anyways, I said it enough. Let's move on. But thanks for the information. That was very good, Kathy. We have a proposal to subdivide. 8.6 in the RM of Alexander. It's for information. Anybody want any further information on that? Thanks, Jody, for providing that. We have the long service and retirement celebration. So you have a committee, Kath. I don't know if it's Kath or Jody. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the committee's been hard at it, and I think Jen and Jamie and Stacey have been working at some of the logistics behind it, but part of what we are after from the Board of Trustees, who are a pretty big part of our long service and retirement celebration, Paul, you as the board chair or someone you designate would bring greetings from the board. We have a series of toasts and roasts and speeches and photos and video opportunities, but we are in need of trustees to assist with treaty acknowledgement, a toast to our long service recipients, and a toast to the retirees. I included all of the draft information so that you could read that at your leisure in terms of the letters we send to people, but the job jar is listed there if you're interested.
Let's do that now. I'm going to try to get, we need 3 of them. Treaty acknowledgement, toast to the long service, and toast to the retirees. It'd be done on video. Any takers? Trustee Duma?
Retirees? Maybe Karen and I'll do it together?
Okay, so Karen, Trustee Inslee and Trustee Duma have the toast to the retirees. Thank you. Who else?
If no one else is doing something, I'll do something.
All right, so you've got the toast to the long service recipients.
Yay.
And I'll do the treaty acknowledgement. So we've got those 3 jars.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead, Trustee Duma.
Sorry, you done this item on the agenda? Because I wanted to go backwards. Just regarding the letter that for the RM of Alexander, I just don't think the letter is quite right in the second last paragraph. It doesn't quite make sense. So I just wondered if you could re-look at it, because it talks about the expansion of facilities in the RM of Alexander, which is not what we're talking about. We're talking about Gillis, we're talking about Dugald. So that letter almost looks like a bit of a cut and a paste, and it's a cut and a paste on the next one too for Lactabani. So I think it just needs to be edited.
Thank you. We'll take a look at it. Okay. We have SEO update, 8.8. That's you, Jody?
Throw it up here on the board. I think from the last meeting, May 3rd, here I'll expand this too. From the last meeting, the board asked for an update what the SEO has been up to. So I reached out to Crystal to pass on the information. So she typed up kind of what she's been up to, accomplishments since the last update to the board. I wanted her to identify any of the important dates coming up. As we know, May 1st was the first election matters in the municipal world, so that means usually shortly, a few months later, it'll be our school divisions that'll be campaigning, we'll see. So a couple important dates that she identified, as you can see in the report. Also a request or for consideration was maybe some of the challenges she may be experiencing, going through things. Me being new to the role or just a month in, I haven't reviewed the full scope of the budget for the election, but me and her will be reviewing everything in the coming weeks. And then from there she identifies some of the challenges, some suggestions, some interesting ideas for her future plans for the next couple of months. Some things she's also identified is trying to make sure that we have updated maps, things like that. Another thing she'd like to have consider is kind of like a campaign that what's the role of the board and what's the role of a trustee, and kind of put an information point out there to the public. But at this time it was just kind of a brainstorming idea. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, or if in the next board meeting we can bring her in, if there's any one-on-one conversations or questions you would want to direct to her.
So my understanding is, thanks Jody for this. So thanks for the ideas. I think the idea is we would like to see her come and present information and ask questions, or trustees can certainly give some information back. So this is a good, certainly initial plan for it. But I do think that there was some indication about us having her come before us, and a little bit of information sharing back and forth. Anyone else? Trustee Duma?
Yeah, thanks for the information. I appreciate it. I'm assuming she has been billing for some of her work already, okay? And there is a statement there that some wards have small pockets of voters which will not have a division polling station at their municipal voting place. That's a concern. We are rural. We know that there's going to be some small spots around the area, but we have always talked about there needs to be equal access for everybody, no matter how big or small you are. That's really important, even if it ends up costing you something. We have to provide for that. And the other thing there was something else on here that I looked at. Anyways, it's good so far. So, but that, I think it's really important to figure out how to get a voting poll, unless someone else has a different opinion.
So I think that one of the things, Trustee Duma, is I think that we get Crystal to come to the board, and we can certainly then go ahead and do some of that kind of sharing ourselves as to what it is. And thanks about certainly being back and forth, Jody. But let's have Crystal come and give a presentation to us and have conversations back and forth. So I think that we're probably looking for her at either one of the 2 meetings in June for her to come. Is that good, board? Are we good with doing that? Comments? No? Do you don't want to have her, or you do want to have her?
Well, we want to have it, but I'm wondering if June is even too late, because some of the things that she said there, I guess I'm like Trustee Duma, is that there are problems having polls in the school and everything else, so she's got to find out where these things are ahead of time, because it's already in June, and you won't, October, if you're not going to, if you can do it at a hall, you got to rent it, and you got to let them know ahead of time. But there is really a problem with it having polling booths in the school, because we're trying to keep our kids safe. Now we're having everybody tripping through the school when we have classes, so I mean, so I'm not quite sure whether June is soon enough. Maybe we should have it on May the 26th.
Thanks, Don. Trustee Duma?
So, like, I agree, but I definitely don't want to wait till the second meeting in June. It should be at the first meeting for sure. But also, in the meantime, I definitely think we can start looking at website. The Manitoba School Boards Association has already hosted two webinars, and those are available. People can go right online. They're open and ready to view. So it's a nice link. They're already sitting there. If people miss those nights, they're available. So our website would be fantastic. A page on our front end of the Sunrise School Division would be good.
Trustee Rowan?
Just for the sake of time, I would just put 2 points forward that you could discuss with her that needs to be looked at for the next election. Advanced polls in Springfield did not have trustee ballots available at the same time when they came, even though every other ward was done together collectively like that, but there was no advance. There was a brief advertised thing to come to Beausejour, but people went to vote in their areas at their advanced polls, and there was no trustee ballots at advanced polls. So maybe that's an issue to consider. Also, the municipalities did offer mobile voting, like at personal care homes and stuff like that. But again, those are people making their municipal vote and did not have an opportunity to make a trustee vote because that was not offered in the mobile voting as well. So these are issues I think that were really hindering people's access to voting last time around. And especially what Diane, Trustee Duma, has said about the small area. There was no ballot boxes in small areas, and letters were sent asking them to send a letter back to request a mail-in ballot. And a better process needs to be done. Either you just send it directly and they don't return it, but make it easier for them, or just set up spend $300 and have a ballot box available in your area. It was terrible having to go between areas to vote because of crossover in municipal lines. That made it really difficult. Those are things to discuss about because we're in shortage of time. Thank you.
Thanks. No, those are good things. So we're looking at having this lady, Crystal, come. So we're either talking June the 7th. Donna suggested at our learning session. I'd prefer to do it at a public meeting, but I hear what you're saying, Don. Did you not suggest it at?
No, it's just May 26th.
May 26th. What did I say?
That's not a learning meeting.
What's that? Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So the question is either do it May 26th or do it on June the 7th. What would people like to go ahead and do? Trustee Duma? Okay. Trustee Reed? Trustee Rowland, June the 7th is our board meeting. Trustee Nichol, you still prefer to do it on the 26th?
June 7th.
Okay.
It's okay too.
Trustee Harris, June the 7th? Russ? Trustee Inslee?
June the 7th is fine.
For that, appreciate it. Let's move on. Proposal to subdivide. You have that as for information. I do think then kind of we'll take what Trustee Duma talked about, and for the letter we'll take a look at it. Thank you. We have committee reports. So our policy committee, Trustee Harris.
Policy met last week. Just a reminder that, and it's been hinted tonight, we're going to have a couple of learning sessions coming up where the board will be looking at reviewing our strategic plan, board and superintendent evaluations, and a couple other items that are found on our annual planning cycle. Thank you.
Questions for Trustee Harris? You're pretty smooth, Trustee Harris. Thanks for doing that. Finance committee, Trustee Nichol.
I'll have to do it by memory because it's not showing up on my computer yet. The meeting, well, well, 8.11, the attachment. Well, it's there now. Okay. Okay, the next meeting we're going to have is May the 19th, and that's the time when we're going to be talking about remuneration. And we hope to have it back by the first meeting in June, but depending how long it will take, it might be the second meeting in June. The finance meeting, we are trying to put the minutes now on the finance meeting session here. So that's something that you can see. They will be draft because we don't pass it. They'll always be draft because we don't pass until the next meeting on the 19th. So there might be changes. So we'll come up with the final minutes afterwards. I guess that's all I want to say right now.
What time is your meeting?
The time of the meeting is at 1 o'clock on Teams. 1 o'clock? Yes. And along with that, if anybody would like to, wants to join Teams, just let Jennifer know and she will invite you.
Thanks. Any questions for Don in the finance meeting? Okay. Thanks, Trustee Nichol. We don't have a check register. The Education Foundation verbal update. That's you, Jody?
Yeah, like I kind of debriefed on my Secretary Treasurer report. I met with the Education Foundation Committee just on the brief history, which actually is pretty lengthy. I appreciate all the work that everybody's put into it. My predecessor, Scott, putting in the work to get the ball rolling. So I feel like I'm at the final stages of this process. I reached out to the legal team at Fillmore Riley to confirm the documentation that I have is still the same documentation they have. As I understand, the office that I'm in experienced water damage, and I wanted to make sure there was nothing lost or misplaced. By the looks of it, and thankfully, thanks to Kathy, I confirmed the documentation that I do have is the same. So I'm at the final stage where they are just getting back to me on confirmation that the information is still the same. If there was no changes to the declaration of trust, I'll be able to bring it back to the board for the final, final stamp of okay, and then we can start filing some of this paperwork and finalizing everything. So fingers crossed, by June 7th we'll have some documentation coming to get this done. So.
Thanks, Jody. Any questions for Jody? And thanks for the people that attended the meeting and did some sharing. Anything else for Jody? Okay, let's move on. And June the 7th, thank you for putting that date down for coming back to us. We have professional development. Anybody want to share anything about professional development? I can tell you that Trustee Rowland and Trustee Reed, along with Jody and Kathy, we attended the municipal forum yesterday. I remember that now. And there was an interesting report from immigration. They have an immigration officer that's located in Eastman, and the immigration officer gave a presentation, and it seems like the south of the Trans-Canada and Eastman is light years ahead of us with regard to immigration and what they're going ahead and doing with the municipalities and the school division. So that's something that we probably need to get ourselves caught up on. Anything else that you want to add to that, Russ or Diane, Kathy, Jody? Anything else to that? Okay. So let's move in. Our financial monitoring report. Oh. Yes.
It might want to.
It was in the Garson Community Center. It was the first time, probably in 2 years, they had it. So, yeah, it was good. Okay, thanks. Financial monitoring report. We have an action item. Be it resolved that the board adopt the financial monitoring report for the months ended. Am I missing something here? Is this March? Okay, it's for the month ended March, reviewed by the Finance Committee on, help me on the date, when you reviewed it? When was your finance meeting, Don? May the 12th, thank you. Okay, so I'll read that over again. Be it resolved that the board adopt the financial monitoring report for the month ended March 31st, reviewed by the Finance Committee on May the 12th. And then mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Nicol, seconded by Trustee Harris. Questions? Questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll vote. And it passed 6-1, thank you. 10.2 is our student information system. So we have a motion, be it resolved that the board accept the recommendation to proceed with the PowerSchool purchase and install of the student information system module and be funded from the ICT reserve. Be it further resolved that the board approve the use of the ICT reserve for funds of up to $50,000. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Harris, seconded by Trustee Nicol. Questions on this? I'm sorry, seconded by Trustee Duma. Questions on this? Okay. You have a question, Karen?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that there are funds in the budget for this, because when Gord presented earlier, he said on paper things look good, but then he also made a comment about the situations being dire, his exact words. So I just want to make sure that there are funds in the budget to cover this.
So it's $50,000, Karen, is coming from our ICT reserve, that we have money there.
Okay, it just was concerning when God said that, oh sorry, somebody's still got their microphone on, okay, switched it up. It's just when he said like the situation was dire, it just sent up alarm bells, and I just wanted to make sure that there were funds in the reserve necessary to cover it. Thank you.
So yeah, Karen, the motion is saying that the money's coming from the ICT reserve for funds of up to $50,000. Just clarifying that. Thanks, Karen. Okay, we're going to go ahead and vote. And it passed 7-0. Thank you for that. Board correspondence, board response proposal to subdivide of Brokenhead. Please take a look at that response as well, Jody, as we move forward, but thank you for the information. There's nice to know information that is there in 12.0. We have upcoming meetings, our long service awards, June the 9th. So as some of you have, like we call it, volunteered some of you to do that, remember that you need to, Jennifer, when's the deadline for them to get this information into you? Okay, Jennifer will be in touch, and she'll make sure that you hold up to your end of the bargain. She knows where you live to make sure, so thanks, Jennifer, for doing that. Jody, can you please check and see if there's questions from the public?
I can confirm there are no questions from the public.
Okay, thank you. We do not have to move into in-camera, but we do have 2 motions from in-camera. These are on 17 and 17.1. Be it resolved that the board offer the position of the Lac Du Bonnet Senior School Principal 1.0 FTE effective September the 6th, 2022, as recommended by the superintendent. It's moved by Trustee Reed. Are you moving this? Trustee Reed, and seconded by Trustee Duma. Comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. The train's coming into Weymouth. Yes. And it is passed 7-0. Thank you for doing that. And 17.2, be it resolved that the board offer the position of the École Parvue School Assistant Principal, .3 FTE, effective September the 6th, 2022, as recommended by the superintendent. Moved by Trustee Duma, seconded by Trustee Harris. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. And it passed 7-0. Thank you for going ahead and doing that. So we do not have anything else. So we're in adjournment. So our meeting's adjourned. Oh, before our meeting's adjourned, thanks very much, Jennifer. It's awesome about where things are going, and you're probably sweating over there, and I think things ran really smoothly. So Jen, thanks very much. Things worked really well. Anyways, we're in adjournment. Thanks very much. Enjoy your...
There's applause there.
Yeah, I think so.